Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of the Pedestal of Shame for Capcom, and we're going to talk about Resident Evil. Resident Evil 0 introduced Billy Cohen for Rebecca Chambers, and it was very well received and well spoke of, and the graphics were great, and that's Resident Evil 0, and you have to stop a scientist at the mansion with all these creepy slug bug things that drain your life, or possibly kill you. So, story began in Resident Evil 1, where you had the choosing of Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. Of course, Alpha Omega Sin chooses Jill for more item slots and whatnot. Chris is the exact opposite. So, this is where it all began. Started at 0, then 1. Which, Resident Evil 1, of course, I was too young to even play these games at the time, or a teenager for Resident Evil when Resident Evil 0 came out, but anyway, it's just, these games would actually give a little kid nightmares. Because of what Resident Evil is, it's a survival horror game. And Alpha Omega Sin really likes this type of stuff. Of course, yeah. And the direct sequel to Resident Evil 1 is Resident Evil 2, where two new characters are introduced into the storyline. And it's still in the late 90s, but I'll tell you this much, is that it's Leon Scott Kennedy, a new police officer of Raccoon City, and all three of these games got very good reviews. It's just, it seems like Shinji Mikami's developing skills showed that it was taking a plunge backwards rather than forward, and most of the controls were outdated. But, yeah. Then also there's Chris Redfield's little sister, Jill Valentine. No, not Jill, but Claire Redfield. And they have to work together to stop the mutant mutant, which infects Sherry. And that's how Sherry became, well, stronger in Resident Evil 6. And the game was well received. It was released on Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1. It is just, Resident Evil 1 wasn't released on the Nintendo 64. Resident Evil 0, the prequel to all the Resident Evil games, was released on the GameCube. And when it comes to Resident Evil 3, that's when it's Jill again, and the main character besides Jill is Nemesis T-Type, is the main character. Weird how a villain is the main character, but yeah. Yet, everybody thought this was probably the best survival horror game of them all. It is just that it's surprising that Barry came back, and Alpha Omega Sin likes Barry, and the wild adventures of Barry. So, yeah, it was after Resident Evil 1 that the dialogue got better rather than all this choppy butchered English, which Capcom is known for that in the NES 8-bit era, and this was the first step into 3D gaming. Resident Evil was the game. It's just, during Resident Evil 0, 1, 2, and 3 is that the camera angles were a bit, well, hard to handle for the most part. And when it comes to Resident Evil 4, everyone loved this game. It still had survival horror into the whole thing. And protecting Ashley was just one big pain in the rear and in the neck. And this sequel, Resident Evil 4, was released on GameCube first, then PS2, then the Nintendo Wii. It was a well-loved game. And of course, we can admit that in Resident Evil 2 and 4 is that Ada Wong is hot. And she's great. So, yeah. You gotta save the President's daughter, because it's now in the future, way ahead. And, yeah. So, and Ashley's cute too. So, on to Resident Evil 5. Now, like Resident Evil 4, is that you don't have to protect Ashley, but Sheva is cool, but Resident Evil 5 is where Capcom started to suck right here. And it wasn't very well reviewed, it wasn't anywhere near the best game, it just practically sucked. And on to Resident Evil 6, and it's like, really? Resident Evil 6? All the fans, all the die-hard fans, even Alpha Omega Sin, were like, they really could care less about Albert Wesker's son, Jake. No one cared. They hated it. Sure, it's cool that you get to be Leon S. Kennedy, Chris Redfield, and all that, and even Jake and Sherry, which is great. So, that ends the rant. So, I hope you enjoyed it, and just watch my videos, please, and thank you for subscribing, and thank you for supporting me. Alright, bye-bye.